Hi, this is Steve with Thresher Media Group. Welcome to When You're Ready to Listen. This podcast is dedicated to exploring the truth about God, things you may not have understood, may not have been taught, or quite frankly, had a very hard time believing. And since our entire relationship with God rests on believing, it is important we learn how to separate the truth from the many lies and fictions that abound within the religion of Christianity. So when you're ready to listen, tune in and discover a pathway to freedom, encouragement, life, and hope. In our last podcast, we discussed the coming slaughter and the grotesque feast which Yahweh sponsors, where their meal will be the flesh of spirits, demons, and men. The enemies of Yahweh all assembled for war, but oddly, the dragon was missing, nowhere to be found. They all come against the rider on the white horse and his armies. They have a plan, but God, he just scoffs at them. Episode 166, Revelation 19, verses 20 through 21, Part 1, The War. Revelation 19, 20 through 21. And the beast was seized, and with him the false prophet who was performing the signs in his presence, by which he deceived those who had been receiving the mark of the beast, and those who are now worshiping his image, now living. These two were cast into the lake of fire, which is caused to now be burning with brimstone. And the rest were caused to be killed with the sword proceeding from the mouth of him who chooses to now be sitting on the throne. And all the birds were caused to be filled with their flesh. The text immediately jumps from the beginning of the war to the conclusion of the war, without giving us details of the battle. Therefore, before we address this text, we're going to do a deep dive into the codex to get the rest of the story as to how this battle plays out. We have learned that the kings of the earth will drive their armies against Jerusalem, ironically, at Yahweh's bequest. But then it gets crazy and very, very bloody. It simply does not turn out as they had hoped. Ezekiel chapter 30, verses 2 through 3. Wail, alas, for the day is near, even the day of Yahweh is near. It will be a day of clouds, a time of doom for the nations. Isaiah 66, 15 through 17. See, Yahweh is coming with fire, and his swift chariots roar like a whirlwind. He will bring punishment with the fury of his anger and the flaming fire of his hot rebuke. Yahweh will punish the world by fire and by his sword. He will judge the earth, and many will be killed by him. Habakkuk chapter 3, verse 3 through 7. I see God moving across the deserts of Edom, the Holy One coming from Mount Paran. His brilliant splendor fills the heavens, and the earth is filled with his praise. His coming is as brilliant as the sunrise. Rays of light flash from his hands, where his awesome power is hidden. Pestilence marches before him. Plague follows close behind him. When he stops, the earth shakes. When he looks, the nations tremble. He shatters the everlasting mountains and levels the eternal hills. He is the eternal one. I see the people of Cushan in distress and the nations of Midian trembling in terror. Zephaniah 3:8. Therefore, wait for me, declares Yahweh, for the day when I rise up to seize the prey. For my decision is to gather nations, to assemble kingdoms, to pour out my indignation, all my burning anger. For in the fire of my jealousy, all the earth shall be consumed. Zechariah 12, verses 6 through 9. In that day, I will make the clans of Judah like a firepot among pieces of wood, and a flaming torch among sheaves, so they will consume on the right hand and on the left all the surrounding peoples, while the inhabitants of Jerusalem again dwell on their own sites in Jerusalem. Yahweh also will save the tents of Judah first, so that the glory of the house of David and the glory of the inhabitants of Jerusalem will not be magnified above Judah. In that day, Yahweh will defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem. And the one who is feeble among them in that day will be like David, and the house of David will be like God, like the angel of Yahweh before them. And in that day, I will set about to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem. Zechariah 14, 1 through 5. Behold, a day is coming for Yahweh, when the spoil taken from you will be divided among you. For I will gather all the nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city will be captured, the houses plundered, the women ravished, and half of the city exiled, but the rest of the people will not be cut off from the city. Then Yahweh will go forth and fight against those nations, as when he fights on a day of battle. In that day his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, which is in front of Jerusalem, the east, and the Mount of Olives will be split in the middle from east to west by a very large valley, so that half of the mountain will move towards the north and the other half towards the south. You will flee by the valley of my mountains, for the valley of my mountains will reach to Azel. Yes, you will flee, just as you fled before the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. Then Yahweh, my God, will come, and all the holy ones with him. Isaiah chapter 34, verses 1 through 3. Draw near, O nations, to hear and listen, O peoples. Let the earth and all it contains hear, and the world and all that springs from it. For Yahweh's indignation is against all the nations, and his wrath against all their armies. He has utterly destroyed them. He has given them over to slaughter, so their slain will be thrown out, and their corpses will give off their stench, and the mountains will be drenched with their blood. Jeremiah 25, verses 29 through 38. For behold, I am beginning to work calamity in the city, which is called by my name. And shall you be completely free from punishment? You will not be free from punishment, for I am summoning a sword against all the inhabitants of the earth, declares Yahweh Sabaoth, the Lord of hosts. Therefore you shall prophesy against them all these words, and you shall say to them, Yahweh will roar from on high and utter his voice from his holy habitation. He will roar mightily against his fold. He will shout like those who tread the grapes against all the inhabitants of the earth. A clamor has come to the end of the earth, because Yahweh has a controversy with the nations. He is entering into judgment with all flesh. As for the wicked, he will give them to the sword, declares Yahweh. Thus says Yahweh Sabaoth, the Lord of hosts. Behold, evil is going forth from nation to nation, and a great storm is being stirred up from the remotest parts of the earth. Those slain by Yahweh on that day will be from one end of the earth to the other. They will not be lamented, gathered, or buried. They will be like dung on the face of the ground. Wail, you shepherds, and cry and wallow in ashes, you masters of the flock, for the days of your slaughter and your dispersions have come, and you will fall like a choice vessel. Flight will perish from the shepherds, and escape from the masters of the flock. Hear the sound of the cry of the shepherds and the wailing of the masters of the flock, for Yahweh is destroying their pasture. And the peaceful folds were made silent because of the fierce anger of Yahweh. He has left his hiding place like the lion, for their land has become a horror because of the fierceness of the oppressing sword and because of his fierce anger. Zechariah chapter 12, verse 1 through 6. The burden of the word of the Lord concerning Israel. Thus declares Yahweh, who stretched out the heavens and founded the earth and formed the spirit of man within him. Behold, I am about to make Jerusalem a cup of staggering to all the surrounding peoples. The siege of Jerusalem will also be against Judah. On that day, I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the peoples. All who lift it will hurt themselves, and all the nations of the earth will gather against it. On that day, declares Yahweh, I will strike every horse with panic and its rider with madness. But for the sake of the house of Judah, I will keep my eyes open when I strike every horse of the people with blindness. Then the clans of Judah shall say to themselves, the inhabitants of Jerusalem have strength through Yahweh Sabaoth, the Lord of hosts, their God. On that day I will make the clans of Judah like a blazing pot in the midst of wood, like a flaming torch among sheaves, and they shall devour to the right and to the left all the surrounding peoples, while Jerusalem shall again be inhabited in its place in Jerusalem. Zephaniah chapter 1, 14 through 18. Near is the great day of Yahweh, near and coming very quickly. Listen, the day of Yahweh. In it, the warrior cries out bitterly. A day of wrath is that day, a day of troubles and distress, a day of destruction and desolation, a day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and thick darkness, a day of trumpet and battle cry against the fortified cities and the high corner towers. I will bring distress on men so that they will walk like the blind, because they have sinned against Yahweh, and their blood will be poured out like dust, and their flesh like dung. Neither their silver nor their gold will be able to deliver them on that day of Yahweh's wrath, and all the earth will be devoured in the fire of his jealousy. For he will make a complete end, indeed a terrifying one, of all the inhabitants of the earth. Habakkuk chapter 3, verse 12 through 16. You marched through the earth in fury. You threshed the nations in anger. You went out for the salvation of your people, for the salvation of your anointed. You crushed the head of the house of the wicked, laying him bare from thigh to neck. You pierced with his own arrows the heads of his warriors, who came like a whirlwind to scatter me, rejoicing as if to devour the poor in secret. You trampled the sea with your horses, the surging of mighty waters. I hear, and my body trembles. My lips quiver at the sound. Rottenness enters into my bones. My legs tremble beneath me. Yet I will quietly wait for the day of trouble to come upon people who invade us. Zechariah chapter 14, verse 12 through 15. On that day there will be no light, cold, or frost. And there shall be a unique day which is known to Yahweh, neither day or night, but at evening time there shall be light. And this shall be the plague which Yahweh will strike all the peoples that wage war against Jerusalem. Their flesh will rot while they are still standing on their feet. Their eyes will rot in their sockets, and their tongues will rot in their mouths. And on that day a great panic from Yahweh shall fall on them, so that each will seize the hand of another, and the hand of the one will be raised up against the hand of the other. Even Judah will fight against Jerusalem, and the wealth of all the surrounding nations shall be collected, gold, silver, and garments in great abundance. And a plague like this plague shall fall on the horses, the mules, the camels, the donkeys, and whatever beasts may be in those camps. Isaiah 24. Behold, Yahweh lays the earth waste, devastates it, distorts its surface, and scatters its inhabitants. And the peoples will be like the priest, the servant like his master, the maid like her mistress, and the buyer like the seller, the lender like the borrower, the creditor like the debtor. The earth will be completely laid waste and completely despoiled, for Yahweh has spoken his word. The earth mourns and withers, the world fades and withers. The exalted of the peoples of the earth fade away. The earth is also polluted by its inhabitants, for they transgressed laws, violated statutes, broke the everlasting covenant. Therefore a curse devours the earth, and those who live in it are held guilty. Therefore the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men are left. The new wine mourns, the wine decays, all the merry-hearted sigh. The gaiety of tambourine ceases. The noise of revelers stops. The gaiety of the harp ceases. They do not drink wine with song. Strong drink is bitter to those who drink it. The city of chaos is broken down. Every house is shut up so that none may enter. There's an outcry in the streets concerning the wine. All joy turns to gloom. The gaiety of the earth is banished. Desolation is left in the city, and the gate is battered to ruins. For thus it will be in the midst of the earth among the peoples, as the shaking of an olive tree, as the gleaming when the grape harvest is over. They raise their voices, they shout for joy, they cry out from the west concerning the majesty of Yahweh. Therefore glorify Yahweh in the east, the name of Yahweh, the God of Israel, in the coastlands of the sea. From the ends of the earth we hear songs, glory to the righteous one. But I say, woe to me, alas for me. The treacherous deal treacherously, and the treacherous deal very treacherously. Terror and pit and snare confront you, O inhabitants of the earth. Then it will be that he who flees to the report of disaster will fall into the pit, and he who climbs out of the pit will be caught in the snare. For the windows above are open, and the foundations of the earth shake. The earth is broken asunder. The earth is split through. The earth is shaken violently. The earth reels to and fro like a drunkard, and it totters like a shack, for its transgression is heavy upon it, and it will fall, never to rise again. So it will happen in that day that Yahweh will punish the hosts of heaven on high and the kings of the earth on the earth. They will be gathered together like prisoners in the dungeons and will be confined in prison, and after many days they will be punished. Then the moon will be abashed, and the sun ashamed, for Yahweh Sabaoth, the Lord of hosts, will reign on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, and his glory will be before his elders. Isaiah 66, 14 through 16. But he will be indignant towards his enemies, for behold, Yahweh will come in fire, and his chariots like the whirlwind, to render his anger with fury, and his rebuke with flames of fire. For Yahweh will execute judgment by the fire, and by his sword on all flesh, and those slain by Yahweh will be many. All these scriptures give us an intense view of the war. There's one additional passage we should cover, which gives us specific details about some of the nations which Yahweh has already set aside to be involved in this attack. It's a long prophetic passage, it's tied to much of the political landscape of our day, and therefore we would be remiss to skip over it. To help us through this text, we need a guide to help us correlate the biblical names that are used in this text with what many believe are the modern-day territories associated with these names. Except for Persia, all the names derive from the Table of Nations, which derive from all the descendants of Noah. Gog is the spiritual prince over the territories that will lead the attack, Russia. Magog, which would likely be the spiritual prince over Russia and the province north of the Black Sea, right above modern-day Turkey. This is a land that it used to be ruled by the Scythians and extended as far east as the borders of China. Today, it would be the countries of Bulgaria, Romania, Moldova, Ukraine, southern Russia, and Georgia. Persia is modern-day Iran. Cush is the Sudan or Ethiopia. Put is modern-day Libya. Meshech, Tubal, Gomer, and Beth Togarmah can be identified with real 8th and 7th century peoples. Kings or kingdoms of Anatolia, which correlates to modern-day Turkey, Syria, and the Armenian nations. Note, some believe that Gomer can be traced to modern-day Germany. Sheba and Dedan are Arabia, east of Jordan, in the Saudi Arabian Peninsula, and includes the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and other Arabian partners. The merchants of Tarshish began as Phoenician traders, but later this name referred to traders of many nations, including Europe, which are linked with emirs of Arabia. So today, this likely represents the many nations that trade with the Middle East for oil. This potentially includes the United States. As we go through these passages, the historical names will be annotated with the modern names for ease of understanding. Ezekiel chapter 38 through chapter 39, verse 25. This is another message that came to me from Yahweh. Son of man, turn and face Gog of the land of Magog, Russia, Bulgaria, Romania, Moldavia, Ukraine, southern Russia, and Georgia. The prince, the demonic territorial spirit, who rules over the nations of Meshech and Tubal, Turkey, and prophesy against him. Give him this message from Adonai Yahweh, the sovereign Lord. Gog, I am your enemy. I will turn you around and put hooks in your jaws to lead you out with your whole army, your horses and charioteers in full armor, and a great horde armed with shields and swords. Persia, Iran, Ethiopia, and Libya will join you too with all their weapons. Gomer, Turkey, and perhaps part of Germany, and all its armies will join you, along with the armies of Beth Togarmah, Turkey, from the distant north and many nations. Get ready, be prepared. Keep all the armies around you mobilized and take command of them. A long time from now, you will be called into action. In the distant future, you will swoop down on the land of Israel, which will be enjoying peace after recovering from war and after its people have returned from many lands to the mountains of Israel. Israel's return to the land occurred in 1948. You and all your allies, a vast and awesome army, will roll down on them like a storm and cover the land like a cloud. This is what Adonai Yahweh, the sovereign Lord, says. At that time, evil thoughts will come to your mind, and you will devise a wicked scheme. You will say, Israel is an unprotected land filled with unwalled villages. This is the building style of today, open cities versus the walled cities of the past. I will march against her and destroy these people who live in such confidence. I will go to these formerly desolate cities that are now filled with people who have returned from exile in many nations. I will capture vast amounts of plunder, for the people are rich with livestock and other possessions now. They think the whole world revolves around them. But Sheba and Dedan, Saudi Arabia and the other Arab countries, and the merchants of Tarshish, the oil trading nations, Europe, the United States, and others, will ask, do you really think the armies you have gathered can rob them of silver and gold? Do you think you can drive away their livestock and seize their goods and carry off plunder? Therefore, Son of Man, prophesy against Gog. Give him this message from Adonai Yahweh, the sovereign Lord. When my people are living in peace in their land, and you will rouse yourself, you will come from your homeland in the distant north with your vast cavalry and your mighty army, and you will attack my people Israel, covering their land like a cloud. At that time in the distant future, I will bring you against my land as everyone watches, and my holiness will be displayed by what happens to you, Gog. Then all the nations will know that I am Yahweh. This is what Adonai, Yahweh, the sovereign Lord, asks. Are you the one I was talking about long ago when I announced through Israel's prophets that in the future I'd bring you against my people? But this is what Adonai, Yahweh, the sovereign Lord, says. When Gog invades the land of Israel, my fury will boil over. In my jealousy and blazing anger, I promise a mighty shaking in the land of Israel on that day. All living things, the fish in the sea, the birds of the sky, the animals of the field, the small animals that scurry along the ground, and all the peoples on earth will quake in terror at my presence. Mountains will be thrown down, cliffs will crumble, walls will fall to the earth. I will summon the sword against you on the hills of Israel, says Adonai Yahweh, the sovereign Lord. Your men will turn their swords against each other. I will punish you and your armies with disease and bloodshed. I will send torrential rain, hailstones, fire, and burning sulfur. In this way, I will show my greatness and holiness, and I will make myself known to all the nations of the world. Then they will know that I am Yahweh. Son of man, prophesy against Gog. Give him this message from Adonai Yahweh, the sovereign Lord. I am your enemy, O Gog, ruler of the nations of Meshach and Tubal, Turkey and Syria. I will turn you around and drive you toward the mountains of Israel, bringing you from the distant north. I will knock the bow from your left hand and the arrows from your right hand, and I will leave you helpless. You and your army and your allies will all die on the mountains. I will feed you to the vultures and wild animals. You will fall in the open fields, for I have spoken, says Adonai Yahweh, the sovereign Lord. And I will rain down fire on Magog, Bulgaria, Romania, Moldavia, Ukraine, southern Russia, and Georgia, and on all your allies who live safely on the coast. Then they will know that I am Yahweh. In this way, I will make known my holy name among my people of Israel. I will not let anyone bring shame on it. And the nations too will know that I am Yahweh and the Holy One of Israel. That day of judgment will come, says Adonai Yahweh, the sovereign Lord. Everything will happen just as I have declared it. Then the peoples in the towns of Israel will go out and pick up your small and large shields, bows and arrows, javelins and spears, and they will use them for fuel. There'll be enough to last them for 7 years. They won't need to cut wood from the fields or forests, for these weapons will give them all the fuel they need. They will plunder those who plan to plunder them, and they will rob those who plan to rob them, says Adonai, Yahweh, the sovereign Lord. And I will make a vast graveyard for Gog and his hordes in the valley of the travelers east of the Dead Sea. It will block the way of those who travel there, and they will change the name of that place to the Valley of Gog's Hordes. It'll take 7 months for the people of Israel to bury the bodies and cleanse the land. Everyone in Israel will help, for it will be a glorious victory for Israel when I demonstrate my glory on that day, says Adonai Yahweh, the sovereign Lord. After 7 months, teams of men will be appointed to search the land for skeletons to bury, so the land will be made clean again. Whenever bones are found, a marker will be set up so the burial crews will take them to be buried in the Valley of Gog Hordes. There will be a town there named Hamona, which means horde, and so the land will finally be cleansed. And now, son of man, this is what Adonai, Yahweh, the sovereign Lord says. Call all the birds and wild animals. Say to them, gather together for my great sacrificial feast. Come from far and near to the mountains of Israel, and there eat flesh and drink blood. Eat the flesh of mighty men and drink the blood of princes, as though they were rams, lambs, goats, and bulls, all fattened animals from Bashan. Gorge yourselves with flesh until you are glutted. Drink blood until you are drunk. This is the sacrificial feast I have prepared for you. Feast at my banquet table. Feast on horses and charioteers, on mighty men and all kinds of valiant warriors, says Adonai Yahweh, the sovereign Lord. In this way, I will demonstrate my glory to the nations. Everyone will see the punishment I've inflicted on them and the power of my fist when I strike. And from that time on, the people of Israel will know that I am Yahweh, their God. The nations will know why Israel was sent away to exile. It was punishment for sin, for they were unfaithful to their God. Therefore I turned away from them and let their enemies destroy them. I turned my face and punished them because of their defilement and their sins. Everything will happen just as he has declared it. Russia, Iran, and the allies have been preserved for this special day. The level of devastation which Yahweh will bring upon their heads is incredible. Ironically, this is hardly a war. This is more of a victory march, and the Lord's enemies will fall before him as he makes his way to the earth. Psalm chapter 50, verse 3. Our God comes. He does not keep silence. Before him is a devouring fire. Around him, a mighty tempest. Psalm 97, verse 3 through 5. Fire goes before him and burns up his adversaries all around. His lightnings light up the world. The earth sees and trembles. The mountains melt like wax before Yahweh, before the Adon, the Lord of all the earth. Habakkuk 3:5. Before him went pestilence, and plague followed at his heels. And to the angels, those demonic beings who have been following the dragon, he says in Psalm 82, verse 5 through 8, all the foundations of the earth are shaken. I said, you are gods, and all of you are sons of the Most High. Nevertheless, you will die like men and fall like any one of the princes. Arise, O God, judge the earth, for it is you who possesses all the nations. Isaiah 34, verse 4 through 5. And all the hosts of heaven will wear away, and the sky will be rolled up like a scroll, and their hosts will also wither away, as a leaf withers from the vine, or as one withers from the fig tree. For my sword is satiated in heaven. Behold, it shall descend for judgment upon Edom, and upon the people whom I have devoted to destruction. Isaiah chapter 2, verse 12 through 21. For Yahweh Sabaoth, the Lord of hosts, will have a day of reckoning against everyone who is proud and lofty, and against everyone who is lifted up, that he may be abased. And it will be against all the cedars of Lebanon that are lofty and lifted up, against all the oaks of Bashan, against all the lofty mountains, against all the hills that are lifted up, against every high tower, against every fortified wall, against all the ships of Tarshish, and against all the beautiful craft. The pride of man will be humbled, and the loftiness of men will be abased, and Yahweh alone will be exalted in that day. But the idols will completely vanish. Men will go into the caves of the rocks and into holes of the ground before the terror of Yahweh and the splendor of his majesty, when he arises to make the earth tremble. In that day, men will cast away to the moles and the bats their idols of silver and their idols of gold, which they made for themselves to worship, in order to go into the caverns of the rocks and the clefts of the cliffs before the terror of Yahweh and the splendor of his majesty, when he arises to make the earth tremble. Daniel chapter 7, verse 9 through 12. I kept looking until thrones were set up, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His vesture was like white snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was ablaze with flames. Its wheels were a burning fire. A river of fire was flowing and coming out from before him. Thousands upon thousands were attending him, and myriads upon myriads were standing before him. The court sat, and the books were opened. Then I kept looking because of the sound of the boastful words which the horn was speaking. I kept looking until the beast was slain, and its body was destroyed and given to the burning fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but an extension of life was granted to them for an appointed period of time. Specifically, toward the man who is possessed by the beast, the one we call the Antichrist, who is referred throughout the Codex as the Assyrian. Yahweh says in Isaiah 14:24 through 27, Yahweh Sabaoth, the Lord of hosts, has sworn, saying, surely just as I have intended so, it has happened. And just as I have planned so, it will stand, to break the Assyrian in my land. And I will trample him on my mountains. Then his yoke will be removed from them, and his burden removed from their shoulder. This is the plan devised against the whole earth, and this is the hand that is stretched out against all the nations. For Yahweh Sabaoth, the Lord of hosts, has planned, and who can frustrate it? And as for his outstretched hand, who can turn it back? Isaiah chapter 30, verse 27 through 33. Behold, the name of Yahweh comes from a remote place, burning in his anger, and dense is his smoke. His lips are filled with indignation, and his tongue like a consuming fire. His breath is like an overflowing torrent, which reaches to the neck to shake the nations back and forth in a sieve, and to put in the jaws of the peoples the bridle which leads to ruin. You will have songs as in the night when you keep the festival, and gladness of heart as when one marches to the sound of the flute, to go to the mountains of Yahweh, to the rock of Israel. And Yahweh will cause his voice of authority to be heard, and his descending of his arm to be seen in fierce anger, and in the flame of a consuming fire and cloudburst, downpour and hailstones. For at the voice of Yahweh, the Assyrian will be terrified when he strikes with the rod, and every blow of the rod of punishment which Yahweh will lay on him will be with the music of tambourines and lyres, and in battles brandishing weapons. He will fight them. For Topheth, the place of human sacrifice to Molech, has long been ready. Indeed, it has been prepared for the king. He has made it deep and a large pyre of fire with plenty of wood. The breath of Yahweh, like a torrent of brimstone, sets it afire. Isaiah 31, 7 through 9. For in that day every man will cast away his silver idols and his gold idols, which your sinful hands have made for you as a sin. And the Assyrian will fall by a sword, not of man. And a sword not of man will devour him. So he will not escape the sword, and his chosen, selected, appointed, will be discomforted or burdened. His rock will pass away because of panic, and his princes will be terrified at the standard, declares Yahweh, whose fire is in Zion, whose furnace is in Jerusalem. Daniel chapter 8, 23 through 26. In the latter period of the rule, when their transgressors have run their course, a king will arise, insolent and skilled in intrigue. His power will be mighty, but not by his own power. And he will destroy to an extraordinary degree and prosper and perform his will. He will destroy mighty men and the holy people. And through his shrewdness, he will cause deceit to succeed by his influence. And he will magnify himself in his heart. And he will destroy many while they are at ease. He will even oppose the prince of princes. But he will be broken without human agency. The visions of this evening and mornings which has been told is true, but keep the vision secret, for it pertains to many days in the future. Isaiah 66, verse 14 through 16. But he will be indignant towards his enemies. For behold, Yahweh will come in fire, and his chariots like the whirlwind, to render his anger with fury, and his rebuke with flames of fire. For Yahweh will execute judgment by fire, and by his sword on all flesh. And those slain by Yahweh will be many. It's safe to say that we do not want to be among those who stand against Adonai, Yahweh Sabaoth. Let's stop here, and our next podcast will pick up with the aftermath of the war. I'm glad you tuned in and have been ready to listen. To get a free download of the full written transcript with all the scripture references footnoted, please go to threshermediagroup.com. That is THRESHER mediagroup.com. This is Steve with Thresher Media Group. When you're ready to listen, tune in.